Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome to Pepatien's 12th annual Bronx Artists Now Showcase and Conversation event. This is presented in collaboration and in gratitude with Oslo Center for the Arts and Culture and BAD, Bronx Academy of Arts and Dance. Pepatien Bronx Arts Collaborative was founded in 1983 by Marian Soto, Pepon Osorio, Patty Bradshaw. I started working there in 99. I've just kept it all going, and it's been a beautiful ride. We gratefully acknowledge our privilege to be able to work and create on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Wakiskik and the Siwanoy nations. And in addition, we acknowledge the ancestors of the Tainos of the Arawak people of the Caribbean. And to put that acknowledgement into action and to share that we're going to have our 5th annual Indigenous gathering on June 25th, 2020 at Classen Point Park. It's Bronx Indigenous Futurism, and this is a project that's co-led with Caridad de la Luz. And this gathering celebrates the summering place of the Siwanoy. You can tell why. It's beautiful. The rivers come together, and it's a beautiful point. And we put a little plaque on a bench there, so you can sit out and look at the waters. And it's that location is where the Siwanoy village Snackapins was. So you can check that out. And I might put a link in the chat for a recent article about it, whatever. So tonight is Configurations in Motion, Performance Curation and Communities of Color, the 4th iteration. There was a gathering based in Vancouver, British Columbia, in the western part of Canada, with some of the artists and scholars and curators that have been part of the 3 previous years of gatherings. This is all in collaboration with Tommy F. de France at Slippage at Duke University. And yeah, I just thought like we crafted this book, which you can kind of see. And it was like, we have to do something to celebrate it. It took us like a lot of work to write all the essays. And one of the editors is here tonight, Natalie Tinyan-Gan, who we were talking to you about some of her process maybe. And we're just going to keep it simple. There are 4 curators and dance artists and writers and scholars and researchers and amazing people in the room. And each one of them is going to talk for 10 minutes about their curatorial practice and maybe how they see their curatorial practice shifting, or how do they see performance curation shifting in these days, which is the future, which is now. And if you have any questions or observations, whatever, feel free to add that to the chat. And I'll be putting bios in the chat as we go. Because yeah, you're going to meet 2 artists from Western Canada and 2 artists from more around New York area. I hope that's good enough to start us some context. We're just going to dive in, I think, and see where we go. I'm going to first invite Olivia C. Davies to chat about her work, her performance curation work. And yeah, each one is in a totally different area of the world. So put your seatbelt on. Thank you, Olivia.
Hi, everyone. And thank you so much for the warm welcome, Jane. I realized I should have asked this much earlier, but would I be able to screen share?
Greg or Louise?
Yes, you can.
I think.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Thank you. I'll just pop this up here. So hopefully it will be shared automatically. Oh, you can see my brain. There we go. Okay, so what I'm bringing up here, just to give context, and I'll introduce myself and where I am and where I'm coming from. So I'm very excited to be a part of this conversation in this circle and learn from each of you and the work that you're doing. Anishinaabe Kwe, I'm a mixed heritage Canadian Indigenous dance artist, curator, and a couple other things in there. New mother too. My babe is just asleep above me, and it's changed my life forever to be a mother now too. But as a curator, I've been the keeper of what is currently the Matriarchs Uprising Festival as a method of celebrating dance by Indigenous women. For now, the work has primarily been in creating connections across Australia, New Zealand, the United States, and Canada. but we hope to open that up to a wider and broader circle. Right now, it has also been a matter of really just connecting with some beloveds that I've either met personally or otherwise had kind of personal connections, drawing into the circle that is the Matriarchs Uprising Festival. So we're not at a point where we're doing open artist calls yet, though going into our 5th year in 2023, that's looking like it's going to be the next step. I'm here on Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory in Ontario, though my company, Odella Arts, and the Matriarchs Uprising Festival is based on unceded Coast Salish territory in Vancouver, BC, Canada. So working across the nation right now has really been the joy and frustration of working as a curator in a pandemic. There's been a number of really cool opportunities that have come up because of this, and then some challenges, of course. But in the overall, I think I'm really excited to say that it's been a learning curve that I'm really like thriving in now. So okay, enough about that. I'm going to share what's up here. So what you're looking at is the Matriarchs Uprising website that was designed by local Vancouver artist Deanna Peters, celebrating dance by Indigenous artists. Our work right now has been in creating a festival from the 14th to the 19th coming up next month, which had originally been intended to showcase a number of live performances at the Dance Center, a pretty cool black box theater in Vancouver that also, the building itself is an old bank. So it's got a number of different spaces that are studios and offices, but all dance, and a lot of different communities that intersect through that building, not only more of the Western contemporary and ballet communities, but flamenco, oh my gosh, dance hall, classical Kathak Indian classes, as well as contemporary Indigenous dance class, studies, research, residencies, creations, and then international artists that come through the building. So a really vivid, I hope that gives you a vivid picture of what the venue is, as the Dance Center has been home to many different groups over the last 20 years. And have graciously supported the Matriarchs Uprising Festival in its beginning in 2019, all the way forward through to this year's festival. So we're offering 2 live works in a double bill over 2 evenings, over the 18th and 19th. And currently the BC restrictions on gatherings are requiring that venues are working at 50% capacity. So although we are able to offer this presentation to, I believe, I think it's like 150 in the Black Box Theater. That'll be cut to 50%, which I love the artists' willingness to work with that, because both Jeanette and Maura have come to me with a request to reconfigure the space and take it out of its more traditional, tiered seating, and are going to be doing something a little bit more creative, which I too will actually only learn about on the nights of the performance, but something to provide it with a bit more of a, not necessarily a cabaret style seating feel, but something a bit more intimate that encourages a little bit of movement through the space too, instead of just simply going and sitting in the darkened theater for the experience of live performance. We had hoped to have a number of other artists on the bill. However, some of which had spoken to me directly in our communications and saying they didn't want to travel this year. Great. We've got on-demand videos available for people to experience from the comfort of their own home, their laptops, their screens, and those are going to be up and running for the week. And a number of these are artists that had been invited to share live work through our performance bills, but have incredible work that they've done this year, some of which have actually been filmed in theaters. with some really, with some really beautiful production value. So excited to share those. And then finally with master classes, workshops, and circle conversations. And I'll stop sharing the screen now. Please visit the website as we've just gone live with the full schedule. But with the master classes, workshops, and circle conversations being a really important part of the Matriarchs Uprising Festival, in that the mission, I guess, the foundation of what I was inhabiting, like I was really coming at this as a contemporary Indigenous dance artist. I want to see my friends up on stage. I want to train with them. I want us to be able to share praxis and practice and conversation, and let this really be an experience that throughout a week, audiences, witnesses can come and engage with these incredible artists, not only from the space of the theater, but from the spaces of these circle conversations, which I can talk a little bit more about, as well as sharing in workshops, community level workshops that are really open and accessible to anyone, regardless of dance background, movement background, or more of the masterclass level of training for fellow dance artists, people who are really seeking that that next level of dance and movement in their training. And looking at that as the broader sort of, how are we going to spread this out over a week? Well, by offering all these adjunct activities prior to the live performance, the intention there is that those witnesses who are coming to the live performance events have already engaged with the artists, have some sense of what the form is, maybe through the practice of taking the workshop or the masterclass, or by being invited to be in circle in conversation with the artists. Again, not in a traditional panel, you over there, us over here, and never the two shall mix, but really in sitting in circle together and holding space for everyone in the circle to share their thoughts and ideas on what we're bringing. This year's festival has also been, and I'm going to speak a little bit around challenges, because I'd love to hear from the others on the call to understand how we're meeting these challenges and jumping through the hoops, but has been in figuring out, well, if we really want people to access this work, then how can we make it as barrier-free as possible? Understanding that some people who are living in Vancouver are going to be interested in wanting to see the work live, but also in recognizing that the artists themselves had chosen to not necessarily share their work through live stream. So what else can be offered from the comfort? What else can be accessed from the comfort of your own home? Which is where we sort of brought this on-demand video portion to the festival to really encourage that engagement, regardless of what barrier might be in place. Let's see. Thank you. We're and I guess we're also at a precipice too in understanding how these hybrid festivals are developing out of the challenges of the pandemic, and might actually be a stepping stone into the future, into how we can not only engage artists from so many different spaces and places and time zones through these other modalities, but that it's also looking at, I think anyways, looking at how the varieties of work that becomes available becomes a really interesting mix, and might not have been something I thought about 4 years ago when I was really embarking on this adventure. I meant to set a timer. I think I'm up to my 10 minutes. I'm really happy to answer any questions or chat further, but looking forward to passing the mic back to our host, Jane. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much, Olivia. I really love just that thought of, and just that there's something else going on with that quote of, like, you want to see your friends on stage, training with them, having conversation with them. Like, it's it feels like there's a need there that you're like, I need this as an artist. And I know that other artists I work with need this too. And so you're kind of creating that platform. Does that ring a bell a little bit or?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, and I think that's where it's also become, something that I've witnessed in the works of people that have mentored me along the way in my career is where, if I look to Raven Spirit Dance and the work that Michelle Olson and Star Marenko have done in bringing us a small sort of underlined showcase of a larger showcase event to actually bringing it forward and becoming the curators of that larger scale event in the last year, it's like, okay, this is where we're going, and how the platform itself is meant to perhaps be tilted and toppled at times so that more and more of us can feel like there is space on the main stages for our work to be presented. And that work of engaging audiences also comes from an understanding of, well, what education needs to happen, and how can that education happen in such in a gentle way that it feels very welcoming and open. So
yeah, that's great.
Totally, that resonates.
That's great. Thank you so much. We'll come back to other things. I know Natalie has some ideas too. She's percolating with. And next up is Rasu, who, Rasu, I think you're here, and it'd be great to catch up with all that you're doing. I know there's a ton, and that's it. That's all I want to say. Thank you, Rasu. Okay.
How you doing, everyone? Excuse me. How you doing, everyone? First of all, I'd like to give thanks for the invitation to speak here. My work historically, before I do that, let me give thanks. I like to give thanks to, first of all, the lands that I'm on, the Lenape people, Montauk, and Canarsie people, the land called Brooklyn. I also like to give thanks to my ancestors. I am of Caribbean descent, so my Curation family, my Antiguan family, and the Coromantee people, for which our lineage stems back to the motherland. So with that, a little bit of context, and I'm also going to share my screen. And pardon me for those who may have seen my presentation before, but nevertheless, I'm going to, it's a little funky. I always find sharing Keynote funky on Zoom. So bear with me, everyone. I'm going to do a quick, there we go, cool. So just going to talk a little bit about my practice, and my practice is social sculpting. So anyone that know my work from historically has been both a social and a curatorial practice, civically engaged, socially engaged practice. That includes performances, public interventions, conversations, public programs. I don't curate things or objects, really working with artists as collaborators and being in a visionary standpoint to put forth ideas, right? So those ideas can be in a form of like civic engagement, humanities. I work in philanthropy now, community organizing, and it's a discipline agnostic practice, as well as really being foot to ground, knuckles to ground in terms of the way I organize around the work. And you may hear the vernacular of creative ecosystem. So I like to define that, right? So this is about, not really being defined by industry or production, but really looking at creativity and innovation as its own, lack of a better word, industry, but I like to use ecosystem. So connecting multiple networks. So I'm going to go into a very lightning quick background of my work and then bring you up to speed. So my creative practice, I have a history which I've met Paloma in this context. I've met Jane in this context where I worked in theater, right? So I worked with the likes of Oguiar Pacelli, Ralph Lemon, Large Jan, Martha Muti Joseph. And my work has really been around contextualizing the work. So that is public programs, that is humanities, taking the the context and the themes off the stage and bringing it to the audience. This is an image here from Toronto waterfront, Large Jan's Holocene project, which deals with ritual and climate change. And this is a photo here of Bufu by Us For Us, a community organizing event that we put together right at the moment where Trump was elected, and really galvanizing on how to quell a lot of the anxiety that was happening at the moment by using performance, by using facilitated practice. This is a hackathon that was done. My background at New Inc., at New Museum, ran an incubator inside New Museum, and we did a hackathon. We brought social justice organizations, designers, and artists together to collaborate to create resources and technologies and capacities for social justice organizations, which is oftentimes because of financial capacity and also network, those networks normally do not connect. And me as an ecosystem facilitator is bringing multiple networks together to collaborate. I have a seminal project called Gabriels in the Sty. I live in Bed-Stuy, grew up in Bed-Stuy, partially Bed-Stuy, and started to see a shift in Bed-Stuy, the early notions of gentrification. Now we're in full-blown gentrification. Bed-Stuy has turned into the Upper East Side. But nevertheless, I wanted to be in conversations with my neighbors. This is my partner in crime at the time, Kwesi Abenses, who's a tremendous photographer. And what we wanted to do was be in conversation and create a wall of fame of what we call community griots, right? Who could tell the contextual history of the neighborhood, who have stories around what the neighborhood was and what the neighborhood should be. And the vision of the neighborhood should come from the community, not from real estate developers or politicians or anything like that. It was really important for the community to be involved in this project. Not only were they interviewed and subjects, but they were collaborators. We also installed the mural together. I called everyone who were my subjects to come together and install this piece with me. This piece was then repurposed for Sunset Park Portraits, which we did the same concept in Sunset Park, which is historically a Latino and Asian community that was also seeing a shift. So I work with one of my favorite collaborators, Stephanie Mei-Ling, who's a documentary photographer, and we created this mural of photography throughout Sunset Park. This was back in 2015. My history also is with Afropunk, working with artists, again, as collaborators to bring themes off the stage into a public setting, working with folks like Baron Claiborne. And now my work has shifted into a philanthropic context. I work for Lambent as the cultural network curator. What that means is we have a network of grantee partners across New York, New Orleans, and Nairobi. My work is really to think about the intersections, themes, and opportunities for resources and collaboration amongst those institutions. These are art institutions that have social justice as a practice, right? So really, if you notice, my work is really around practice, social justice, and art is the tool to connect networks and people. So we are values oriented, mutual accountability, justice and equity, cultural landscapes matter, uncertainty and emergence. Emergence and uncertainty, what better time to have that as a value, right? With COVID going on. So these are a few photos of some of our grantee partners, and I'm going to jump through this. This is on the left-hand side, Uhuru Gardens in Nairobi. On the right-hand side, Treme in New Orleans. This is at Wajiku, which is a community organization by youth in Nairobi, Kenya, that was organized. There is no head, right? So they shift leadership every 3 months, right? So the Wajiku is really informing us how to have a decentralized organization. Then COVID came and my work kind of stopped and had to be pivot and recontextualized. We know that COVID actually talks to a paradigm shift, right? So we've seen paradigm shifts in the past. That is the 1918 pandemic, the Great Depression, World War II, September 11th. And with that shift, something happens. The way that we see the world, the way that we behave in the world shifts, right? So COVID was that shift for us. You know, Black Lives Matter, COVID, stay-at-home mandates, vaccinations. Our whole world was pretty much turned upside down. Yet we're being asked to normalize and do the things that we've always done. That's a little insane, in my opinion, right? With a paradigm shift, there needs to be shift in the way that we practice. So it is the economic, I'm not going to stay here for too long, but there was a tremendous economic impact on the arts and cultural sector due to COVID, right? So just in the US, we looked at somewhere around 15 billion loss in revenue, right? Audience spending loss, audience loss in terms of bodies and attendance, right? So this tremendous loss because of the stay-at-home mandates, but also it wasn't a time to just open up the doors to bring in performances, art, and cultural engagement. So what's happening from there, right? Who's shifting, who's pivoting, who's adapting, right? And these are words I like us to kind of seep into our consciousness. Shifting, adapting, pivoting. If we're not doing that, we're going to die with the old paradigm. We have to shift. So for example, I'll give you an example here. Participant NYC launched Participant After Dark, where they pretty much created a programmatic format that simulated the stage, right? So you go to a particular performance at a certain time, and you sat there and you watched it. It wasn't recorded, and then it was done. It went dark, right? So it created that ephemeral moment to engage art. And this is something that we look at as a pivot. For me, what I did was also lean into the pivot. If you see my work, as I presented earlier, my work is really about being socially connected with people, foot on the ground, engaging with people. And then I had to really question myself, like, what does my practice look like virtually? So I started getting in conversations with artists, curators, and other philanthropists, right? And to really think about, let me go back that slide, and think about, what does your purpose look like in a moment of a paradigm shift? What we also started to see was artist support initiatives and collective funding, right? So Mosaic Network put together a network around their network of which we call Alana. So that's Asian, Latino, African American, basically long-term for BIPOC-led organizations to rethink how do we grant, to rethink how do we connect, and also rethink how do we resource each other. So that's an ongoing initiative, and it started right before the pandemic, but the pandemic gave it some urgency. We also see the Artist Release Fund out of New Orleans, the Creative Action Fund, which organization that I'm on the board of, the LP Launchmat Project is part of, and sorry, the Artist Release Fund was actually by USA Artists. The Creative Response Fund is out of New Orleans. So these are some collectives, funding collectives, and artist support that really responded to COVID, right? To not be beholden to the system, but to really think about how can we collectively come together and respond to a national emergency. There was also the Artist Call at Three, the Culture at Three conversations, which was the ongoing emerging conversation to think about how do we respond to a loss, the kind of like emerging loss of the cultural sector. And it was live, it was emerging, and it's still going, but nevertheless, this was a very important, at the time, they didn't know it, or we didn't know it, but it started to emerge as a thing and ended up getting funding. And then we saw a great shift in appointments, boards, leadership, artistic directors, presidents of people of color who have been traditionally left out in the cold to come in. For example, we have Legacy at the Kitchen, Legacy Russell at the Kitchen, and then you also have Antoine Sargent at the Gagosian, right? As some appointments, and there's so much more of a shift. While we're looking at moving folks towards accountability and diversity and inclusion, there were people who were ready and cultivated to take on those positions. Also looking at collectives like Building Back Bed-Stuy, which I'm part of, a collective of bringing together artisans in Bed-Stuy to really emerge, and I'm wrapping up here, to emerge what talent and creativity looks like in Bed-Stuy that is not gentrified, right? How do we emerge, and how do we bring things out that already exist within? So Building Black Bed-Stuy. Also, I'm a mentor at Radcliffe Art Design Incubator, which are folks who are in the art and design school who are thinking about entrepreneurship for their practice. So my work at New Ink is informing how to advise in this particular incubator. And like I said, social practice, wide ranging, right? So you're getting a little bit of what's happening here. And then I launched with the partner this creative institution called The Corner. And The Corner is around bringing creatives and leadership together, right? So who are going to be the leaders for the next paradigm? What is the themes? What are the conversations? And how do we mentor each other? So The Corner, I'll leave it in the chat to learn more about The Corner. And the last thing that I'll leave with is going back to the inner world, right? So doing all this work in the social context, what was missing for me is how to bring my spiritual and personal practice forward and share with others. So 3 of my brothers and I came together and we created Men at Work. And we're really looking at patriarchy, undoing patriarchy, and invited other men to be courageous enough to come together and think through some of the things that may be in their way that impact society, so society can move forward, right? So taking accountability for the male-bodied and male-gendered person to really examine themselves. This is something I personally do and wanted to share with others. So Men at Work is a project that I've been doing, and I did that as fast as I could. Thank you. Hopefully that was coherent and makes sense.
Thank you so much, Rasu. That was awesome. You're like, whew. That's why I was taking notes. I was like, let me get that. Wait, let me get that before it like went by. But no, that was really great. And I just feel like you also bring this like real entrepreneurial like viewpoint to everything. And that's just like, and that's really about agency. And I don't know, it's always great. Like I always want to hear what you're doing now, because it's like, okay, what are you doing now? Because it's always like something else that just came in. But
that
thank you so much.
That last one was the thing that I'm doing now, right? The
Yeah,
last
that was
two.
Yeah,
the last slides.
Yeah, the last 2 I hadn't heard about that. That's what I mean. And the thing also, it's like you all heard each other back in whatever it was, October 2020. But it's yeah, it's also, you're all doing a lot. So this is another chance to kind of like get into your mind again, to like, okay, Olivia's really bringing like main stage and artists and community engagement in gentle ways. And Rasu has got all this like social justice and different practices and trying to also bring the inner to the out. Anyway, I'm forgetting that we're on Facebook Live. This is not a social moment.
It is all
okay.
good. It is all good. But it's really about how do you bring these values and principles and really express them, like truly express them, coming from a place of authenticity, not just talk, not just tweets, not just memes, but how do you do the work, right? And the work keeps shifting. As society and the context shifts, how do we shift with the work? So I'll stop there, but that's really what my practice is really about.
Yeah, that's great. It's really great to have that as another framing to look at all of this work. And performance curation, performance curation is not a one note thing. It can go a lot of directions. Thank you so much. It was great. Woo! Okay, I told you. So like inhale in and then exhale out as we move to Paloma McGregor and hear all about what Paloma is up to these days. Are you there, Paloma?
Yeah, but I can't start my video. I don't have permission.
Shoot. Oh, Stos, can you help us with the video?
Oh, now it's saying I can. Fantastic.
Okay, good. All good.
I'm not accustomed to asking for permission to do that.
All right. It's just technology. Yeah.
Appreciate y'all. Thank you. I want to give thanks to Olivia and Rasu for seasoning this pot you invited us into here, Jane. Thanks to the folks who've shown up. I'm calling in from stolen Lenape land, colonially known as Harlem, New York, and also by some of my people as Sugar Hill, and originally from II. That's right, exactly. That's my Curation brother there. The lands of the Taino, Arawak, and Carib, now called St. Croix, a current US colony. Last time I was with y'all in 2020, I talked a lot about the geographies that I've navigated in this US context since leaving my homeland at the age of 10. And increasingly, over the course of this illuminating moment we're finding ourselves in right now, I am understanding some more about my own historical impulses to gather beloved community, which is what I said at the time, as a migrating person, and the ways in which gathering people together became a lifeline and a way of life that is predates any notion that I had of being a curator or a choreographer or any kind of professionalizing. And so I just want to name that because I also want to honor, oh yes, bless you. I also want to honor our, what we know. No, that's okay. Listen, that's sneezing, that's fine. What we know, I want to honor what we know before we name it. And I think a lot of my impulse has been to name and rename. So this, to challenge the naming that exists, that pre-exists for us, like curator, or, to see if that actually fits. And if it doesn't, to figure out what are the namings that do fit. So I love this notion that Rasu brought up about shifting, adapting, and pivoting. And maybe for white institutional cultures, that feels like new territory. But I would say for many of us in my communities, and just from hearing from the folks who've already spoken so far, shifting, adapting, and pivoting has been a way of existing in the world that predates this moment, and whose wisdom perhaps is only now being honored or named or surfaced. And so I'm thankful for this illuminating time that we're in, even as we navigate the grief of it. I'm a choreographer, is some language they say, and an organizer, and a mommy. So congratulations, Olivia. My 6-year-old is sitting on the couch over there. So if I get interrupted during this moment, you'll know that it's very important, whatever I'm being called to. So I've cultivated a choreographic practice and an organizing practice and a family building practice and a beloved community building practice. And I feel like all of those things are related to a set of core values that I have named now as the co-founder and artistic director of Angela's Pulse, but that the core values are really quite personal values, and that came out of a doing and a practicing. There's a way in which the cultural practices of capitalism enforce an idea of sort of naming, producing, showing the product that I'm trying to disrupt, and that these core values that I'm about to name help with. So before I talk about my practice, I want to talk about, or at least name, where they come from, because the values feel maybe more important than any one thing I might say that I do. And the core values there are 6 of them. There are 5 of them. We are process oriented. We believe in dialogue and experimentation as both means and end. We center the authentic over the predetermined. We allow for trust and growth to develop as a result of spending time, challenging assumptions and inherited notions, digging in and working from joy. That value has come in very handy over the course of this time together. We are collaboration based. We believe we are better together. We value our individual assets, voices, histories, and the potentials they hold when we activate them in the service of a vision larger than any one of us. We are community-centered. We believe that communities of geography, practice, values, identity are themselves powerful creative acts. We honor that power by practicing community building and community bridging. We are anti-racist. We believe that racism is the glue that holds all of our dehumanizing and oppressive systems in place. We work with rigor and love to consistently practice undoing the impacts of racism on us as individuals, as a team, and as collaborators with others. And finally, we are embodied. We believe the body offers the most powerful, intimate opportunity to transform values into action. We center practices that allow us to tap into our embodied intellect, push beyond our known limits, and animate our visions. And I bring up the values because, I'll talk about a few things that I do and that I'm doing, but I feel like the ongoing practice in curation, in choreography, in family building, in cultivating love and spirituality within all the work that we do is about continuing to reanimate these values and, if needed, to shift the articulation of the values based on what the work is calling for, what the people are calling for. I'll say that at 47, I feel like I'm just becoming more myself, and so is my practice. So there's a bit of wildness that I'm appreciating increasingly. That wildness is a practice, that there's a practice and a logic and a wisdom in the wild, and that some of my resistance to certain namings or certain relationships to institutions comes out of a desire to honor a wildness that I think is inherited and necessary for both surviving and thriving. What I'm working on right now is something that has to do with a decade's worth of work. So I'll start there, and if I run out of time, that's all I'll talk about. One of the core platforms of my work, of Angela's Pulse's work, is an initiative called Dancing While Black. And in May, Dancing While Black will be 10 years old. It'll be our 10th anniversary, and I want to give a big shout out to Bronx Academy of Arts and Dance, where Dancing While Black was born, and who continue to be ongoing doula aunties to this practice. Dancing While Black is a platform that has adapted and pivoted and shifted over the course of the decade, and was born out of a desire to convene Black dance artists whose practices don't fit neatly into the field's boxes more frequently than the field seemed to have an appetite for, or a vision for, we'll say. I think there's maybe an appetite, but there was not a vision for us gathering regularly. The platform has produced a couple dozen performances, supported 3 years of a fellowship class of emerging dance artists, published a landmark digital journal. And in 2019, we took a little pause. We were born in 2012 and took a pause in 2019 to activate the network of folks who had come to call Dancing While Black home, to see of what use this platform had been, where their visions might intersect with the resources that we were starting to pull together. And the following year, the pandemic hit. And so we've had a few years of contemplation and activation to do in ways that have been quite internal and profound. We launched at the beginning of the pandemic an initiative that grew out of the Dancing While Black Fellowship called the North Star Arts Incubator, which is supporting 10 New York City-based artist activists to, first of all, be. So in 2020, a lot of it was just, let's meet and let's just support your being. Now going into the third year of this program, supporting the same artists, but pushing forward a couple of visionary initiatives that a few of them have surfaced and developed over time through our regular meetings, through using the resources of project management for connecting folks to experts in areas that they were wanting to do deeper research to see how their practice might be emboldened by that expertise, including farming and land acquisition or land shepherding, cooperatives and collective economic models. And so coming into this next year, there'll be a few of those projects that we will move forward into their next stages. Another thing that came out of the pandemic and out of having the time was a quarterly gathering called Moon Time, which allowed us at Angelus Pulse to pull together folks who came from quite far-flung areas of our practice, students we'd met at University of Virginia when we produced some work there, students, folks who we'd supported in the fellowship program, people that we'd met through community engagement up at Jacob's Pillow. And so bringing our network of folks who might have their own particular experiences of Angelus Pulse's practice and values at work, but who are not yet connected. So weaving together this network of folks who had come to call Angelus Pulse home. And then this year, going into the 10th anniversary of Dancing While Black, I have invited in, and I'm grateful to 3 dance artists, one from each of the past Dancing While Black fellowship classes, to be in co-leadership around the programming of the season, which will thematically be exploring how we do, how we be, how we build, and how we thrive. And so looking at gathering community together to showcase performance. We know we can do that, and we have actually lots of spaces to be Black and performing in the world. Although I would say there probably could always be more, or the way those spaces operate could be more nurturing or bring in more people who have a greater capacity to support the work. However, there are many other aspects of our working and being and thriving that are not just around the final product that we spend so much of the rest of our time moving toward. And so really trying to honor areas of practice, areas of healing, areas of intergenerational exchange, and of sort of resource building within our time together. So I'm not sure if I'm at time, but I'm not sure if the clapping in the chat is a note about time, but I'll say that I'm really excited about the way in which the other thing that's come with being this age and that really surfaced for me in the pandemic is my in-betweenness or intermediariness, that I'm the middle now. You know, I'm the generation between my mentors, Jawale Zoller and Liz Lerman, and many other, Dr. Kimberly Richards, John O'Neill, rest in power, I'm the intermediary between those folks and another generation of folks who are pushing practice. And so it's an exciting place to be in ongoing collaboration with those folks, and to be in the middle and see what kind of creative, beloved space we can, what kind of circle we can build together to hold these visions that I think these powerful visions that I think will come out of this time, and also to help hold the things we've learned, that the inertia toward producing and toward the sort of patriarchal capitalist impulse. We've been practicing, but we need each other to practice more. We need to keep holding hands. So that's what I'll say for now. And I'd love to just be in exchange.
Yeah, that was, always beautiful, Paloma. That was great. Paloma, it's also nuts. Like, I've known you for a really long time.
You've known me since I moved. I feel like I talked to you the first month I lived in New York City in 2004.
Like something. So it's just so funny. I'm like, wow, and I love that thing too about you as the bridge between knowing the generation, knowing all their struggles and all the history and all the cultural wealth and all of that. And this younger generation, really need this, we need this. And also to see how this performance curation of dance, it just goes into cooperative farming and land and all these things, just the body. There's so much expression. There's so much, the expansiveness of it. Anyway, it is amazing. Your work is amazing. It's always beautiful to hear what's up. Thanks for, good. Rasu put in some links about all his work too.
That's the hardest working man in this field. I was watching that PowerPoint. Rasu, unmute yourself.
I'm over here laughing. That is so West Indian to do all the things.
You're doing all the things. I love it. And Charmaine, I see you on the call. I'm talking about you too when I'm calling out my people that I'm looking forward to. You know what? One thing I just want to say though about this intergenerational is there's also tension, and it's there's a generative tension there that I think, that I want us to be clearer about and more intentional about activating. It's not, and these people, and then I took this from them, and then I passed it so neatly on. This is not like a relay race. We didn't, we're not going to pass the baton neatly each time. And some of us may not want the baton. And, so also to engage in this ongoing community building so we can have real conversations about this.
Totally. It's not neat. Rasu, did you want to say something? Are you okay?
No, I just want to, I just love hearing what Paloma is up to. But the thing for me is it's really about, there has traditionally this kind of roadmap towards being an artist. I have an idea, I go to art school, graduate, get an MFA, graduate, get my art job, boom, 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 boom. And then what Paloma has been illustrating is what kind of my presentation was about, this kind of emergence where those boundaries kind of break. And you said it, Jane, she's doing the Dancing While Black, doing performance curation, theorizing, right? It's a theorist, right? But then also doing this kind of indigenous work with land and stewardship, right? Which when you really think about it, and I'd love to bring Olivia in here as well, so we can have break the fifth wall, right? that we realize how much art has to usher and steward society, right? Get rid of these Wall Street guys and Silicon Valley guys. They're not doing. They put us in a place that we're not trying to dig ourselves out of. So I think there's room for the feminine aspect to lead us, and that is truly creativity. That is truly listening. That is truly adapting, pivoting. All of this has to happen in simultaneity while being intentional what our work is about and being purposeful about it.
The future.
I see your note, Jane. I'm gonna put my video off.
Okay. So next up, thank you so much. We're gonna keep talking. Jessica McMann is next. And gosh, I'm going to put her bio in the chat, but just let Jess kind of talk about where she's based, where she's coming from, and the work that you're doing. Oh, there you are. Hey, Jess. Hey, thank you so much for being here. Can't wait to hear everything.
Thanks, Jane. Hi, everyone. I am calling in from Cochrane, Alberta, which is located in traditional Blackfoot territory since time immemorial in what is now called Canada. And I am Cree. I'm from Cowessess First Nation in Saskatchewan. And I would consider myself an emerging curator. I currently work for the City of Calgary as an Indigenous curator in public art. I have a Master's of Fine Arts from Simon Fraser University in Contemporary Dance and Composition, a Bachelor of Music from the University of Calgary in Flute Performance. And over the past few years, I've been very lucky to find a job after being a full-time performing artist and to really dive into curation. And it is with a government institution. But I feel very lucky that they already had steps in place, and they've been working on changing how things are done for 4 years. My hiring was a result of those changes, and I have a lot of freedom within my job to do what I want and to develop the programs. The only thing that I come up against is my own capacity to do all the things that I want to do, since I do maintain an active music career at the same time. I don't know if I was part of the original conversations, but if I were to think back to then, in the beginning of the pandemic in 2021, I was really mourning the loss of my dance career. Since I didn't have any shows, everything was canceled, and I haven't done much dance since then, just because I don't have any way to do that. No matter how hard I try, the community and what Calgary is in terms of dance arts is not a place that I can see myself in as an Indigenous person. So I haven't really done much aside from just, doing my traditional dance and going to powwows and ones that we can't go to and maybe practicing a bit. But other than that, I have really stepped away from being a dance performer, just because there's nothing there for me. But I have, in terms of my curatorial practice, I have really tried to bring the performing arts into the public art space. My job is to make space for Treaty 7 artists and other Indigenous people that live in this area to create public artworks, to do social practice public art, and to really see themselves. Part of that challenge is that nobody trusts the government, of course. So I'm here in this position to hire people, and there's lots of money I want to give to people, but there's still so many barriers that I'm trying to reduce, as well as really build those relationships and have make people comfortable with applying to this process. So one of the first things that I took over when I started working at the city is this project, which just went up recently. I'll share it in the chat, but I could also, I guess, share my screen. Share screen, share this, share. Okay, so this is called Past, Present, Future, and it is a local Blackfoot artist. So in this area of Alberta, we're considered Treaty 7, which is actually much smaller than what traditional Blackfoot territory used to be. The traditional Blackfoot territory, or the Nitsitapi people, went from Jasper National Park, following the North Saskatchewan River all the way into Saskatchewan, Prince Albert, and then going straight down into the States until you reach the Yellowstone River, going west across the Yellowstone River to the spine of the Rocky Mountains, which is the Great Divide, and going straight up towards Jasper again. At the edges of these territories, there's the Cree, the Dene, the Ktunaxa, the Secwepemc, and the Crow. And so traditional Blackfoot territory is not necessarily representative of what treaty is. Part of my work is educating and really trying to bring in artworks and performances that look at the relationship of the land from the Blackfoot people that goes past treaty. In Canada, a lot of the times, especially in the Plains, people talk about history and they start at treaty, which was September 1877. However, that's when settlers came in, that's when the Queen sent her treaty people and conned Indigenous people into signing these treaties through starvation and withholding of supplies and the murder of the bison in the Plains. So there was no food sources, restricting movement. So people often like to start, this is the treaty lands, but we actually have to look at those longer histories of land and who lived here and whose traditional territories and what does that mean. So for this artist, this is a Blackfoot artist, to be the first person to have public art as an Indigenous person in a place of government. So this program put his banners right outside council chambers where all of our decisions are made. This program was initiated with our previous mayor, who was really supportive of Blackfoot people and Indigenous people, but it took quite a long time to actually get into because there's lots of bureaucracy that I had to deal with. And when these banners went up, I was so happy. And interestingly enough, Caleb, all of his work centers around dancers and traditional dance. So in his past, he looks at this mountain, which is a sacred mountain to the Blackfoot people, really plays on those traditional stereotypes of what people think we were in the past, but also is true. Really put in important symbolism for ourselves. And I think too, his artwork really speaks to the love of the Western that Calgary has and that Calgary public has. They love the whole Western historic kind of view of things. They love their cowboys. They love their Indigenous peoples, although it's called out here, they say cowboys and Indians. So it's very they really love this type of art. Also, I'm stepping into a role that Calgary public art has never had a really good experience with the public. We have lots of controversial artworks. There's lots of calls for the public art program to be shut down. So within this, I was really able to find a happy place. We have a lot of positive reactions from the public to this type of artwork, which means if I keep doing this, then maybe I can bring in some of the other things that I want to do, which is some more really artwork of the people, Indigenous voices being really present. But he was a great artist to have as the first major public art project that I was able to curate and put in. The present is where we are now. And that includes the return of the bison to the plains. Out here, we have something called the Ine Treaty, which is the Buffalo Treaty, which works with nations in Montana and nations along the edge of the Rocky Mountains to bring the buffaloes back to the plains. And part of that was bringing bison and putting them in Banff National Park, and they're free to roam. They're not held in a fenced area. And so part of this image is that powerful return of our ancestors to this land, which is also a huge controversy as well with farmers. So I think that this really unifies everybody. And of course, we have to have iconic Calgary imagery in it. And then the future, where did that go? The future is about everyone moving together in positivity, which I think is a really hopeful message. And he's really drawn in on POW dancers and dancers without regalia and really everyone coming together. So I'm really proud of this as my first large curatorial project. There's a video about it as well. And then I have other projects. One where I'm specifically targeting performance artists, because I think that performance is a really good way to bring life into a space, especially a municipal space. So the Indigenous Placekeeping Program is about activating that often sterile environment of the council chambers and the atrium of the municipal building, which, aside from the banners, doesn't have very much art except for a really ancient painting of Calgary, which is the bay in Scotland, of which our city is named after. So I think there's a lot of possibilities. Part of encouraging Indigenous people to apply to these opportunities is building those community contacts again. And so Again, there's the systemic things of the city of Calgary, which are, I can't have in-person gatherings because of COVID. There's very strict city restrictions. There's modes of communication, so official city channels that I have to use. So recently, I just got approved to have a specific Indigenous public art Instagram and Facebook group. Indigenous people use Facebook and Instagram. They wouldn't get me a TikTok, but we'll see about that. To really connect with my community. Postering, I put out physical posters. I started doing information sessions that follow the seasonal round, which is a Blackfoot concept around the equinox and the solstice. So each of those seasons, I host community information sessions, and I ask elders from the community to open the sessions and bless the sessions. I hire artists from those communities to also be a part of them, so that they're being paid to be there, and then they bring in their friends or other artists to these community information sessions. I find that those were super successful. Instead of having the usual artists that always apply to a public art project, we had 13 artists, Indigenous artists, apply to what I have is the Land is Home project, which was like super exciting because not all of them are new to the city. None of them have applied to public art project or worked with the city before. And all of them came from the Treaty 7 signatory nations. So out here, we have 3 nations that signed Treaty 7 in September 1877. And that included the members of the Blackfoot Confederacy on the Canadian side, so the Siksika, Gaina, Piikani. And then we also had members of the Stoney Nakoda, Wichissabi First Nations, which they're all from Inithni, which is just out there out my window, which is their land allotment. So there's Stoney Nakoda, the Stoney Nakoda nations are Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Wesley. And then we also have a Dene nation that landed in this area and had an agreement to live here with the Blackfoot Confederacy about maybe 5 to 700 years ago. As they were traveling through. And so they're relatives of the Dene, the Navajo down south, as well as the Dene up north in northern Alberta and the Northwest Territories. So they also reside in this area in their Sitana. And so each of those nations, as well as I had a general information session for all of the nations who couldn't make it to my other meetings. And so with that type of, community building and having the elders speaking to them in their own language, in the Stoney Nakoda session, the elders spoke to them in Stoney Nakoda. I don't understand Stoney Nakoda language, but being a part of it was really powerful and impactful because they were all speaking their language to each other. And then I had a lot of applications from the Stoney Nakoda nations, which I think was really, I think that the community building part of it helps build the trust with the artists and the people to apply to these opportunities. And I think that when it comes to these curatorial practices, often we have to do a public art call or a call to artists. There's huge barriers within that application. Just even having to read through the application, and a lot of the artists wouldn't read the PDF. They only applied based on the oral sharing that I had offered. And then they just kept my email address and submitted their application. And so reducing the barrier of that application process really opened up the possibilities for more artists who would never apply because there's so much PDF to read, or there's so many words to read that they don't see themselves in these applications. So I created 11 artists and 1 performer. There was a dance artist who was going to apply, but she didn't. And it's like, I really wanted her to, because I think that there's a lack of performance in public art. Often it's just sculpture, painting, and mural. And out of those 2, murals are the most temporary. And I find that the mural opportunities is what is offered to BIPOC artists in the city. So they get maybe a 2 to 5 year lifespan of a mural, and nobody's buying their sculptures. Public art isn't programming greater works or any social practice works. So it's very much looking at how can we look at this collection in terms of what can we improve on, what needs to be in the collection, what local artists can we really lift up. 3% of our collection is Indigenous artworks. And that's not a lot. Probably about 10% is problematic artworks by non-Indigenous people who've just created artwork about Indigenous people. There's a piece where there's a called Indian Girl, and it's about an Indigenous girl, but all her body parts are abstracted and spread across the canvas. So there's a lot of problems with what has been acquisitioned into the collection. And that's part of my job here, is how do we present this, and how do we talk and present an exhibit that realistically addresses how the problems and the images that are in our collection that fall into that historical, we're all warriors of the plains category, or problematic interpretations of Indigenous people on the streets in the 70s, to this fantasy vision. Interestingly enough, the works that were also acquired into the collection by Indigenous artists contribute to that view of Indigenous people. So there's no contemporary Indigenous art. And the ones that we do have, like this one we see here, called Guapo Cakes, is, again, it's land-based, which is great, but also it's still of animals with Blackfoot names. So it still removes us from seeing ourselves in public art in a contemporary way. So I think that there's a lot of, I'm really looking forward to my job in the future as I work towards the Indigenous Placekeeping Program and looking at what can we do to bring contemporary Indigenous artists into the present? How can we present and build those relationships with artists who don't see themselves? And how can we incorporate performance and those more ephemeral and temporary artworks into the collection, or present them from a city point of view? And a lot of that, I think, is really based in the ability to build relationships and break down those barriers and what an application has to be. That brings me to one of the other projects that I'm working on, which is called the CEP project, which I am advising on to these dance presenters in Canada. And I want to talk briefly about this because I think that this is a really great way in changes to curation in terms of what often happens is that people come to us, and I see this in my job, I'm basically that person, where a company or an institution, a white institution, comes to you and says, we don't know anybody, can you find somebody for us? And then you're expected to really depend on all your personal relationships with people in the community and bring them forward, and put your elders on the spot, put the community people on the spot. And they don't actually do any of the work in building that relationship. And so what's been really interesting in working in this project is that myself and co-curators, Brian Solomon and Winnie Ho, are looking at how we can undo this process. And so we've presented a really interesting proposal to these curators as they're looking for participants for their program. And part of it is that we're not going to exploit our contacts, but the companies have to find and build their own relationships with emerging BIPOC dancers and bring those names forward to us and propose them to us. They learn their histories, they learn what they want to do, they learn why they want to be a part of this residency, and they don't actually do an application form. So it's on the presenters to find that person, build that relationship, see if they're a good fit, and then propose them to us as a curator panel. And what we're there for is to just make sure that they're actually emerging people. They're not bringing forward somebody that they've worked with for 5 years and is calling them an emerging artist, that they've actually done their work to find somebody new or find somebody truly emerging that would never apply to this position in the first place. And then we're there to support those artists through this online across Canada residency with seven emerging artists. So instead of us exploiting our relationships, it's really about encouraging and supporting the presenters to build those own relationships within their own community and really go down to that grassroots level and find out who's dancing, who doesn't get these opportunities, who's creating the work for themselves, looking through TikTok, looking through Instagram, and finding these artists so they can be fully supported. And a lot of it is opening up the funding and really just giving that money to the artists to do what they want with. So instead of prescribing, oh, we have $2,000 for a video presentation and all these other things, it's really about what does this artist need to be successful in this residency, and how can all this money be given to them? So if they're just going to go and rehearse and read books about that they don't have time to read, because I know as an artist, I don't often have time to read all the books I want. I was telling my co-curators, wouldn't it be great if we just had a reading residency where we got paid to read all the books we don't have time to read, and read all the articles we don't have time to read, and just like sit there and read. And so we actually wrote that into the proposal, where if that's what the artist feels they need the time to do, is to do this type of research, then they get their living allowance of $3,500 a week, and they do that. And that's on the presenters to really trust these emerging BIPOC artists, because often they don't trust the artist, to do what they need to do to advance their career with no expectation of a product, which I think is really radical. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that moves forward with our support. And I think that when you put some minds together, some really decolonizing ways of thinking and doing can emerge. And that's what I try to do in my day job as well, is to like really think about how we can just change things so that more art can be presented, more work can be bought, more work. Like, I think it's just really important. Since I'm in public art now, that's what I think about a lot, is this, you know, how can we have ourselves present in public art? So the Land is Home project, which I don't think is on here. The web page isn't up, but it's on that page. So that was really about finding land-based works that really encourage that to people to learn about that traditional connection that the Blackfoot, Sitinan, Stoney Nakoda people who are originally here have with the land. Oftentimes, a lot of the artwork that we present is not from local Indigenous people. We are importing a lot of Indigenous artwork, which is great and fantastic because there's amazing artists coming in, but oftentimes that relationship that we need to have with the signatory treaty people is being lost. And so that's part of my drive too, is to look at those historical relationships and kind of tie all of my passions into one. I don't know if I'm at time, but I can stop there.
That was wonderful, Jess. Yeah, everyone's really coming towards us from very different places. So there's a lot of different information to take in. But yeah, this presencing and yeah, you're just doing so much. It's really wonderful. And all this intergenerational community building, all this trust building, and yeah, bringing down the barriers of different applications and lifting up the artists. Yeah, so the thing is, the time has flown, which is like, how did that happen? I thought we just sat down, but we started. So we have a few minutes, and I think if you all want to, Olivia and Paloma and Rasu, and just come on, and Natalie, just come on, and I'm going to step out. Like, maybe there's something I can sing, a lot of different things coming together, but I want to see what you all, where you're all taking it.
This idea about trust, and particularly trust in relationship to sort of colonized notions of producing, they really resonated with me. I've been thinking a lot about the ways in which our labor has been used over time, and still the narrative around, well, do we trust they'll actually do anything if we just give them money and we don't require them to produce something with their bodies and produce something out of their labor? Really challenges this colonial practice around labor and resources that I appreciate a great deal, and that, yeah, I'm eager to see how that trust is built and rattled over time.
Yeah, to jump in there, you know, as I'm listening to Jessica and also what Olivia presented earlier, is I do see through lines, and going back to trust. When you are part of a community, you want to protect the community from capitalism. You want to protect the community from extraction. You want to protect the community from, quite frankly, fuckery, right? So we want to kind of like protect the community from those things, but we also want to kind of push the community forward as well, right? So there's this interesting tension between preservation and evolution. And who am I to say what is evolution versus tradition? But there's this interesting tension I'm always fighting with, right? And as I'm listening to something is I'm not saying it's basic as the process is, but something as we would consider to be basic as applying for a residency or a grant to be rethought, to kind of do away with all of the intellectualism and get down to the practice of how do you communicate? What makes you feel comfortable? How can you trust us? Where can we meet you where you are, right? And that is a radical thing to do. You know, my organization is also tapping into these things, and COVID has pushed us to do this because when you're stressed out, you're trying to pay rent, you're dealing with hurricanes and, you know, different social inequities. Trying to fill out an application is probably the last thing you want to put all your effort and resources towards, right? So to be able to lean into that is building trust, right? It can be, but it can also be a mechanism that can be utilized to get fake trust and then extract. So as stewards of those communities, it's really important for us to kind of like see those nuances. So something I've just been listening while we're all talking.
Yeah, I was really grateful to hear you speak, Jess. I feel like it's been a million moments since we were last in conversation, and to know that you're thriving in your position and so many are going to benefit is so freaking cool. My other thread, if I can catch it, was on knowing that our conversation this evening has been grounded in a conversation around values, and that it brought me to a really interesting precipice. Only, I feel like it was only yesterday, but it was like 2 weeks ago, where it was like, is Matriarchs Uprising even happening this year? Or are we postponing? Or are we just going to make it all digital and find some way to interact through Zooms? And I get chills just thinking about it now, that like someone questioned my values around the festival. And I had to say, well, in my heart, it's about gathering, and it's about gathering our ideas in a space where we can be fully ourselves and be trusted to share, to practice, to present, really in the thought of that word as the gift that it is, to be present in space and shared space. But the gathering was what was critical. And now looking at how, you know, we are manipulating and moving, and, you know, moving with the times, and recognizing that there's a certain fragility to the time right now too, that feels like it's so, anyways, we talk about the paradigm shift, but it's so visceral, maybe even just as a moving body, as I am. And as a mother, I'm recognizing that there's a lot at stake, and there's also a lot of maybe freedom to play with what those stakes are. And that feels kind of cool too, that we're being given this invitation right now to rethink and reshape. Yeah.
That's great. The thing is, I really just want to do a follow-up conversation someday, or I don't know, or Paloma, you got something. I don't know how, it's like, I don't know how. Okay, good. I hate this because I don't know how hardcore to be about the time, but it's like, because I would just love to keep going, but I'm also like nervous.
Oh, I gotta go because this girl gotta go to bed.
So we have
She
5 minutes.
Tablet and everything.
Yeah, Natalie, did you want to offer something? And then I can also I'm just going to tell people the stuff coming up. That's what I do.
Yeah, I guess just with the 4 minutes left, because I had spent so much time with each of your essays, I had crafted very, very specific little thoughts and morsels for each of you, but maybe I'll save that for this follow-up conversation. But it's interesting, you know, Rasu, in your writing, you spoke about Trojan mice. And so it's interesting what you say, Olivia, about this time being the fragility of this time and the tenderness, and how how like really a lot of us feel like the carpet is pulled from underneath, and so we're just all oscillating and floating along. And just this conversation about like a paradigm shift, but how to do it with care so that we are still whole on the other side. And so I guess my first and last question to each of you is, in the way that this notion of Trojan mouse that Rasu, you mentioned, facilitator Gibran Rivera brought up. You said that these are like little ongoing and inconspicuous breaths that just pump new perspective and new life along the way, making the paradigm shift happen. And I just want to hear from each of you, what is that? What is an example of that inconspicuous way that you are carrying the torch forward?
Thank you for the citation, because you saved me a lot of time. I do not take credit for Trojan Mouse at all. That's Gibran, right? So my whole practice is a Trojan Mouse, right? Like these projects that I have, the engagements that I have, they're not finished products. They're all in process. Sometimes they have a website, sometimes they're messy, and it's radical experimentation, right? And that's the entrepreneurial side of my practice, is just constantly iterating, like not getting trapped in perfection, right? So that's what it is. And also knowing that the communities that we deal with is messy. It's not always perfect, right? So the Trojan Mouse and the radical experimentation allows the grace and grounding to just be with the process. And I'll pass it on.
Beautiful, thank you. Messy.
I'm Gemini and my mind works very fast. Like I'm making connections all the time. Like it's, oh, you should talk to, and this time has really allowed for a practice of slowing down that I used to only activate in my walking. Like a long time ago in New York City, I decided, this city, I will never go as fast as this city, and therefore I will walk slowly. And it helped that I was like in a Caribbean, immigrant community. And I felt like, I can activate that part of me. And so I feel like the pandemic, this moment has invited me to activate that slow walking in my practice.
Thank you.
I feel like every time there's a little door open at the city for something, I bust it wide open. And so even that placemaking project was supposed to be a little mural project that was only up for a year. And now I have a full on 75,000 yearly program that can go in. And so every time there's just a little, I work so hard so that it just opens up. Inglewood, of one painting on a wall for a year is now a yearly program. And I just it's less funded than the other one, but it's still every opportunity, I just feel like I can just take it and do as much as I can to open it to the community and change things, and really reducing those barriers, and taking the wins where I can. So instead of a 5-page call, I have a 4-page call. So it's all of those little things. I find that if it opens a little, I'm just doing my best to just, get the money and run the program and do as much as I can with the least amount of barriers for the artists in the city. And I think that that's a huge breath of fresh air sometimes. And then, but there's also all the weight that it's in my head for that. But I also think I feel so good when I see those artists being like, I can do this, or seeing that new artist, or seeing that thing happen, where it's just all that is for something that's greater than myself, and the community sees the benefit. And then I just keep going and just keep going and just keep going and just keep trying to, continue that expansion, then hire as many Indigenous people as I can. Is I got another curator in. and that's like, she has $100,000 budget. So it's just like, those things are just like, yeah. And then seeing themselves in the cityscape going, oh, there's like, I'm Blackfoot and there's this artist in city, like it's just so much. It just kind of feeds itself, I think, in the end. And I'm a little part of that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just echo the word care, and how if I'm being as cared for as I've been, if I'm caring as far as I have been cared for, then I'm carrying forward the intention that has fueled the love I have for this work and for the community, and what it means to hold and behold the beauty that exists, the magic that is there to witness and be activated by.
Really lovely. Thank you. And we are at time, and there are children, and everyone has lives, and we are in talking about care. Let us gather once more. Hi, Jane. Welcome back. If you want to take it home.
Thanks, Natalie. That was great. Good job. That was quick.
Dope.
Efficient.
I'm just, my stuff is just the thing stuff. Am I still on? Am I, no, I froze. I'm just going to, do my thing. This is my curatorial practice. I don't know, like, here's stuff, booklets. If you want to look at, we have, just to tell you also, we have tomorrow night is the Bronx Botanica. It's a live performance at Ostos. It's going to be live streaming. That's all good. Friday is Rockefeller and Caridad, our hip hop homelands at BAD. They have 4 up and coming artists sharing work. January 27 is Noemi Segarra, Piso Proyecto, artist collective from Puerto Rico, sharing their work at Ostos, and then Caridad de la Luz from Puerto Rico, January 28. And we'll have an online showing of that later in February. That's my quick update on what's next. Listen, thank you so much, everyone. Like, this is such a great, like, bringing places together and people together. And I can't wait. We'll keep it going. There's more here for sure.
Thanks, Jane.
Thanks. Yay.